being here. We just took a little tour of the seawall project, and that's something that obviously is going to grow as an issue. Climate change is real. The oceans are warming. When you look up at Greenland, it's just one big ice cube on top of a piece of land. The ice mass on Greenland is 1,000 miles long, 300 miles wide, and a mile high. So as each year goes by and we look at that ice formation and we look at the ocean next to it, we can see the calving of the icebergs coming off of the Yaloshavin ice formation up there. We're right now here outside of Massachusetts. We have the fastest warming body of water in the world. The fastest warming body of water in the world. And so that means the tides are higher, the storms are more intense. Even when we had that winter of 113 inches of snow, that was during a year where in Anchorage, they had 21 inches of snow that winter. And what had happened is the currents, the air currents are changing. And so we just had this super cold air coming down and hitting us. But as it hit our ocean, which is getting warmer and warmer, that's what created that kind of Gronkowski-like spike of snow that hit us. It's that kind of a change which is creating this incredible issue that Scituate has to deal with, and it's only going to intensify as the years go by. But there's another storm that is coming. It's already here, and it's only going to intensify, which is the opioid crisis. In Massachusetts in 2016, 2,000 people died from opioid overdoses. Of them, 1,500 had fentanyl in their blood system. Massachusetts is 2% of the population of the United States of America. We're about 6 million people out of 300 million people, 2%. So if you took our 2,000 deaths and you multiplied them by 50, which would be the whole country, that would be 100,000 people dying from opioid overdoses in 1 year. 2 Vietnam Wars every year. If you took our 1,500 deaths from fentanyl out of those 2,000, and you just took fentanyl and you multiply that by 50, that would be 75,000 people dying from fentanyl overdoses every year in the United States. So only 33,000 people died in the United States last year from opioid overdoses, which is a much smaller percentage of people who would have been affected if they were dying at the same rate as people in Massachusetts, 33,000. It would be 100,000 if it was the same rate as Massachusetts for the whole country. It would be 75,000 from fentanyl. So we're being hit at about 3 times the rate as the rest of the country. And to a certain extent, we are a preview of coming attractions for the rest of the country if we don't, as a nation, put in place the protections against it occurring and the treatment that helps families to be able to deal with the issue. We all know you cannot incarcerate your way out of this problem. And so yesterday with Representative Cantwell, who is chairing a very important committee to look at this opioid crisis in our country. We were in Taunton yesterday, and Senator Keenan and Representative Cantwell came over so that we could have a round table there in Taunton. The reason I went to Taunton is that in January of 2014, as the as the speaker at Martin Luther King Day, January 15th, 2014. I was standing in the back of the room just like this, and the mayor was there, Mayor Hoy and Chief Walsh of the police department, and I said to them, what is the biggest issue in town? And they said, well, it's opioids. And we think fentanyl, which is being added to the heroin, to the cocaine. And how bad is it, Chief? He said, well, it's terrible. Something is happening every single day. So what I said was, I'll come back next month, and what I did in February of 2014 was bring back Gil Kurlikowski, who was the drug czar for the United States. And I brought back a whole other team of people who were experts on this issue, but they weren't experts on fentanyl. They were hearing about fentanyl in a city in Massachusetts with the experts who were the police department, the fire department, the emergency responders, the mayor. That's where we were going to learn about the issue, not from the pharmaceutical industry, not from the physicians, not from the federal government. It was definitely something that the local communities were dealing with that just hadn't been fully understood. So we went back yesterday to, like 3 years later, we have another summit in the same firehouse where I had the first summit to talk about what has happened over these years. And of course, what has happened is that the rise in fentanyl is to a point now where in Taunton they say, and I'd love to find out here what is happening in this area, that now 95% of the cases are fentanyl in Taunton. And so maybe in the course of today we can learn a little bit more about what is happening here, how it's all transformed. I went down to Mexico about 4 weeks ago with Ben Cardin, who is the lead Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee. I serve on the Foreign Relations Committee. So we went down to talk to the leaders of Mexico and Mexico City about this fentanyl epidemic, about the need for Mexico to understand what is going to be an expectation from our country about their interdiction of that drug coming into our country. Secretary Kelly, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, when he was being confirmed as secretary, said that a wall is not going to keep these drugs out of our country, and we just have to be realistic about it. We're going to need better police cooperation, better interdiction, better methodologies which we use in order to capture it at its source. And for fentanyl, it's largely the Chinese who produce the precursor chemicals to fentanyl, and then it gets shipped into Mexico, where then in Mexico it gets turned into products that can get sold onto the streets of America. And for us, what happens is that El Chapo's gang is the source for our region, and it comes up through New York City, and then it comes over to Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and it is distributed into our communities, which is why New Hampshire and Massachusetts are number 1 and number 2 per capita in deaths related to fentanyl in the whole country. Okay, so that's the pathway in through El Chapo's gang. So this is something that we're clearly going to have to deal with. I believe that it should be elevated to a level that is equal to nuclear nonproliferation, to trade, and to copyright. I believe that when President Trump is talking to President Xi of China, that fentanyl should be at the top of the list. I believe that when he is talking to the President of Mexico, it should be at the top of the list. When 100,000 people per year, if everyone was dying at the rate of people in Massachusetts could occur, then the terrorist threat for people in America is not in Aleppo or Mosul. The terrorist threat is the call to a family member saying yet another member of that family has been affected by this opioid epidemic. That's the terrorist call that we want to avoid. And so from my perspective, we have this great opportunity in Massachusetts to be the leader, and that is my goal. And so I partner with Jim Campwell on these issues, and want to work with Senator O'Connor and Representative Machino to do the same thing. This has to be a bipartisan issue. It has to be one where Democrats and Republicans are working together. We need more money to help the communities deal with these issues. A vision without funding is an hallucination. You just can't do it if you don't have the resources in the community to make it possible to provide the services to give the help to the families where they are living. So I'm working very hard to release the $500 million. They just announced today, the Department of Health and Human Services, that Massachusetts is going to receive about $12 million out of the $500 million that will be now coming up from the federal government to help in cities and towns. And Trish will be applying sometime later on today in order to get a disproportionate share for Scituate. But that's how I see this issue. It's federal, state, and local. It's the nonprofits all working together to kind of attack this. And I'm looking forward to learning more about what is happening here and how all of you are dealing with this crisis. So again, I thank you, Trish, for everything that you are doing, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.